Good afternoon. Welcome to this seminar. On behalf of Zest Marketing Events, the company who organizes this hybrid and electric auto show, I'd like to thank you all for being present here and also to our sponsors. In the next hour, we will discuss the role of hydrogen in the future of mobility, a world vision. For that purpose, I would like to congratulate and say a special thanks for our speakers, which I present now. Mark Embler, based in Silicon Valley, he is the managing director providing advisory service to both corporate clients and startups on matters that related to the transformation of mobility space, autonomous electrification, shared and connected vehicles. Welcome, Mark. Next, on my left side, we have Diogo Almeida, graduated in chemical engineering from Instituto Superior Técnico and specialized in foresights and horizon scanning from Alliance Manchester Business School. He is at Galp since 2002 with a professional journey in different areas of energy value chain, namely in the area of petrochemicals, supply chain management, strategic planning and energy transition, being actually responsible for the hydrogen business development. He is also a founding member of NR21, an energetic think tank. Thank you, Diogo, for your presence. On the screen, we have also Pedro Guedes de Campos, who is Financial Engineering Officer at the Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. He is the European body exclusively dedicated to the management of Horizon 2020 funds for fuel cells and hydrogen. Welcome, Pedro. Last but not least, we have Nuno Carvalho, graduated in engineering from the Faculty of Energy Engineering in Porto. In 2007, he joined Bus thanks to the Lean Management project that was part of his Management and Industrial Engineering Masters. In 2009, he joined the oil company Total, embracing an international career for 10 years. In 2018, completed an MBA program in Singapore, being currently the CCO of Bus and an administrator at UK. Thank you all for joining us. At the moment, we are aware that electric and hybrid cars are the present and also the future. Alongside with that, we see that hydrogen fuel cell will also be the future and are still in the present. Like we have companies like Toyota, Hyundai, Renault, Peugeot, Land Rover and more that are developing solutions based on hydrogen. Just a few news regarding the hydrogen. The universal hydrogen and that has a plan for the aviation sector. Netherlands being the first country having a ship for inland navigation. The double-deckers are on the road based on hydrogen. They are on the road in Scotland. Also the Hyperion, a new supercar fueled by hydrogen. And also Galp that recently signed a statement in order to promote the green hydrogen in Europe alongside other 8 companies. Also, in the competition side, the famous Le Mans circuit has a plans to create a specific hydrogen competition and also a technical solar boats company formed by students that has developed its first hydrogen boat called São Miguel 01. Last year in Portugal, we noticed that the government approved the 2020 National Hydrogen Strategy, considering that, I quote, the presence of hydrogen in value chain is essential. So we have a rich debate here about the hydrogen. Mark, I don't know if you are listening to me. I will start with you for the first question. In one of your monthly newsletters, you highlighted that the future of clean mobility also includes fuel cell electric vehicles. In example, hydrogen fuel cells combined with high pressure, a hydrogen tank, and the battery pack to power the electric motors. However, at the same article, you consider that the United States is at risk of failing, at risk of being left behind when compared to other nations. So in which situation is the American market right now regarding the fuel cell, the hydrogen fuel cell? What's your vision and insights about it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone in Portugal and wherever you are listening from. Yes, I'm indeed based on the west coast of the US in Silicon Valley, and I tend to observe what's happening on this side and compare to what's happening in Europe and around the world. And definitely, as far as hydrogen mobility is concerned, the US is lagging and will likely continue to lag. A couple elements behind that. There are no significant federal state initiatives in the US as compared, for instance, to Europe or individual European countries, as you've mentioned, or as compared to China, Korea. The US has nothing there, private initiative, but nothing that will drive at the state or federal level. There's also a deficiency in terms of the fueling network. The US today only has about 75 charging stations, fueling stations, and 2/3 of them are in California, and that compares to, that's out about just over 500. I think it's 550 stations at the end of last year. So, and it compares to about 200 in Europe. And also one element is that the industry as a whole is heavily focused now on battery electric, and as a result, innovation dollars have been flowing to battery technologies, to motors, to inverters, and the rest, at the expense of fuel cells and reservoir or tanks. At the same, and yet we have a few startups here in the US. One on logistics, for instance, Universal Hydrogen, that has attracted funds from companies around the world, Plug Power in the fuel cell, Hyzon in the truck, or Zero Avia for airplanes. So there is some activity, but definitely the US expect will continue to lag.
Thank you, Mark, for your vision. Pedro, are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Taking these words from Mark, I invite you to share your opinion and your insight about the European markets based on the fuels hydrogen. What's your vision about the European market? It's similar to the United States. It's similar to the Asia. What's your opinion about it?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I'm very honored on behalf of the Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Charter Taking. As you know, we manage the Horizon 2020 for the European Commission, but also for the industry and research. So basically, we have been working on this since 2008. And what we see is that it has the uptake in terms of mobility has increased significantly, even if, for example, and comparing to the US, in Germany, we have 100 refueling stations, and there's not much more around Europe. So basically, in the northern part of Europe, you have a few stations. They are building up, so the network is building up. Right now, Benelux plus Denmark, Sweden, and so on, they have a few stations, but yet there's no network, no infrastructure that actually feeds this. But giving it a wider perspective, there are several angles to this topic. It's all around the chicken and egg dilemma of what comes first, right? So is it the end use applications or is it the hydrogen infrastructure? In Europe, we clearly say both, and with as much European value chain integrated as possible, okay? So that's the main message. So we want industrial development in Europe and to back this infrastructure and the end use. On both the end use and the infrastructure sides, our charter taking has studied and demonstrated the business cases. This is the viability of the solutions of green hydrogen in light, medium, and most and foremost, heavy-duty mobility usages. Examples of these are studies that we did for buses, for garbage trucks and trucks for long haul, but also aviation and airports, studies on railway, demos on maritime and ports, with a study, by the way, in the making regarding the potential for ports as hydrogen clusters, with huge spillover effects across the board, from mobility to power and to industry and so on and so forth. Europe is doing its utmost to be at the top in terms of the technology development, competing with other regional blocks. And here I would highlight China, of course, but also Japan, South Korea. Australians are doing a lot as well, and of course the USA. And but we are competing with the other blocks, and we're keeping the lead in some parts of the technology. And basically, we're not focusing on a single one, but actually all of them at the same time, because there are spillovers between one and the other, even between electrolyzers and fuel cells, because it's the reverse process. So we look at it with full value chain mindset.
Thank you, Pedro. Curious points about it. Bringing the conversation to the stage now, Diogo, I pass you the ball. from a point of view of a distributor like Galp, what's actually the role of a distributor? What's actually the role of Galp regarding the fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell? What's actually at stage is Galp at the moment?
Well, first of all, besides being a distributor or a retailer, we're more than that. We are integrated, and so we are also the largest supplier of oil products, and so we also intend to be one of the largest suppliers of hydrogen. So we intend to produce it, not only to distribute it. Okay, so that's the first perspective. We are the largest producer and consumer of hydrogen in Portugal today, in our own refinery. Okay, so we need to produce 60,000 ktons of hydrogen on a yearly basis. Yes. Grey hydrogen, so from natural gas with CO2 emissions. And so the first goal that we have, and also to solve a little bit of the chicken and egg dilemma that Pedro was talking about, we don't have that dilemma in our own refinery. We have 60,000 ktons of hydrogen to replace. Okay, so that's where we will start. We'll start by producing green hydrogen side by side with our own refinery, 100 megawatt capacity by 2025, roughly 10,000 kton, 10 kton, sorry, 10 kton, 10,000 tons. And then we'll ramp up until 2030, reaching a minimum of 600 megawatts, which will totally replace our needs in the refinery. And by doing this, we will be decarbonizing the fuels of today, okay? So we will lower the emissions from producing the fuels that we use today before being able to replace them. So meanwhile, we'll have electrification doing its own work, and for heavy duty, we believe that hydrogen, direct use of hydrogen, will also play a role. But first of all, we want to decarbonize our own processes, okay? So meanwhile, while this happens, we will start building demand for direct use, and obviously Caetano Buzz plays an important role. We see a lack of vehicles, and that's for me the largest problem right now, because we can build HRSs all over the Iberia. That won't solve the problem if we don't have vehicles to supply. So that's the second step. We believe that we'll be able to build some clusters in the coming years. Hopefully, in the second half of the decade, we will see a ramp up with more OEMs bringing trucks into the market, vans. That's our vision. And also, there's a third stream of mobility. It's not road mobility, but we have aviation and maritime transportation, which we believe will also decarbonize through the use of hydrogen, the indirect use of hydrogen, but through synthetics, and hydrogen will play also an important role in the synthesis of these products. So we'll work on these three streams during the coming decade, and well, that's a lot we have to do ahead.
And 2030 will be the year. Will be definitely a big year, yes.
I think when we get there, we'll say 2040 will also be the year, because I believe that by 2030 we'll have reached a maturity that we clearly lack today, but I hope to see something happening from 25 onwards.
Okay, perfect. Nuno, Diogo was introducing you first for the stage, so I will continue. Recently, and as I mentioned in the beginning, Toyota and Caetano Bus are one step ahead for saying regarding the fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell. Since the Toyota, as for example the Toyota Mirai, launching the Toyota Mirai, which showcase here in Hybrid and Electric Auto Show, Sora Bus, and also Toyota and Caetano are selling fuel cell systems to other companies. So hydrogen will undoubtedly have a great, will be the future of Toyota and also the Caetano Bus. Have more hydrogen solutions will be on the way for these companies, more cars, probably even planes. What's about it?
Thank you very much. We work very close from Toyota, and Toyota is recently became our shareholder, so we really work together in a daily basis. The vision of hydrogen in Toyota world, it's already existing from a long time ago. It's not something new. It's a vision that was built in the past, and Toyota is always saying that it's the one way for us to have our kids living in a better world. And Caetano Bus also believes on that. We are developing for the heavy-duty vehicles, so for the buses, solutions in hydrogen. So we have already a vehicle, a bus, a city bus, powered by hydrogen. We really believe that this is the future, and in any case, battery electric buses and hydrogen-powered buses will live together because they have two different types of flexibilities for the operators, and they can be accommodated in a city, for example, with different operation requirements. So they will live together. Hydrogen will play a big role on the decarbonization of the heavy-duty vehicles. Electric most probably will support more on the light vehicles and inside the city's activity. So this is more, let's say, a vision on how we see the hydrogen and the batteries living together. In terms of other applications of hydrogen, yes, we are developing, we have today the city bus, we are developing the hydrogen bus for airport operations. We are developing also the articulated bus for the cities and intercity operations. We are also developing a new generation of our vehicles that are the ones for intercity connection, long-range operations. So the vehicles that normally goes from Lisbon to Madrid or from Porto to Barcelona. So this type of vehicles with very high demanding conditions, they will not live without hydrogen. It's really necessary to have the hydrogen development to support the transition for this type of vehicles. So we are continuously developing solutions. In terms of Toyota, so we are one of the cases where Toyota have trust on our engineering, and we are integrating the stack from Toyota in our buses. What we see as well is Toyota indeed making partnerships with other companies, for example, with power generators in France, with Energy Observer, for of course, to spread the usage of hydrogen, to use the hydrogen systems in applications that the EV solution, battery EV solution, is not fully capable to cope with the requirements. And so, indeed, it's the future. It's a future together with other conventional clean energy solutions, and we, Caetano, believe that believes that it's really the future. Yes.
Totally the future. Yes. Thank you for your insights. Moving to the second question. Since the team is hydrogen, they have this advantage, but also have disadvantage. For example, the extraction, the investment that is required, the cost of raw materials, the overall cost, the storage, the production, the infrastructure and distribution, and more. Mark, moving to you again, what in your opinion about this disadvantage that I mentioned, what can be done to turn this energy affordable and easy to access? probably with a point of view in American markets again?
Sure, this is not an easy question, but let me give it a stab at it. Typically in this industry, cost reduction will come from scaling and from innovation. Obviously, scaling, we're at the bottom of the scaling curve. I mean, I think last year there were something like 7,500, so 7,500 fuel cell vehicles sold, so passenger vehicles. And that's the word at the very bottom. So we still have time to come to see scale will generate cost reduction. On the innovation side, at this point, the timing is not great for hydrogen in terms of innovation, at least certainly from the major players' standpoint. If you look at the car manufacturers, they are right now massively investing, focusing their R&D dollars in battery electrification, so in batteries, in motors, inverters, and the whole electrification stack. And that's certainly at the expense of what they could do otherwise on fuel cell. So this being said, what are the areas where effort can be done? Certainly on hydrogen production at this point, hydrogen, if you look at per 100 kilometer cost of hydrogen versus battery EV, there's a ratio of about 6:1, so roughly $15, at least where I live in California. There are about 50 hydrogen fueling stations. So there's probably largest fleet in the whole country. And the cost per 100 kilometers is roughly $15 versus about $2.5 for a battery EV. Again, this is the cost of energy to drive 100 kilometers, a 6:1 ratio. So there's certainly a lot of effort to be made at this end of the spectrum. On the station side of things, a hydrogen fueling station is also quite costly. So in order to scale the network, here we're talking about over $1 million from my understanding, versus maybe $50,000 for a 50 kilowatt charging station. And then you have also what's inside the vehicle, fuel cell, the vessel itself. And this is another area where you have still at this point a high cost. Vehicles that are in the market today cost upward from $50,000 on the U.S. market. Certainly, whether it's the Toyota Mirai that was mentioned earlier, or the Hyundai Niro, these vehicle costs above $50,000. And one understand also that the actual cost for the manufacturers is even higher than that. So they're losing dollars on every single unit sold. So if I just also add one thing on the hydrogen cost, which again has to drop by a factor of 60 in order for the vehicle for at least that bit of the total cost of ownership to be competitive versus battery electric. I want also to mention that the effort to reduce cost per kilo of hydrogen has to be paired with also the type of hydrogen generation. And what I mean by that is, as the person from Galp mentioned earlier, we need to shift from gray to not only to blue, but also to green hydrogen. And this is so combining this cost reduction with clean hydrogen is also obviously a very key element in order to address sustainability issue we have.
Thank you, Mark. Pedro, at Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking, do you share the same vision? The first question, I was trying to ask you to compare the European and American markets, so I will ask again about the disadvantage when you compare the European and American and Asian market and other markets. You share the same vision of Mark, but regarding the European markets, how can this disadvantage can be turned into advantage? Do you think the problems are the same?
Yes and no. So I mean,
perfect.
Yes, in the sense that indeed it's a question of making the cost drop. That's clear. And no, in the sense that for us we see it in a very holistic way to meet the European Green Deal ambitious targets for reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So with this, for us it's about green hydrogen. That's clear. We only put research and innovation money into green hydrogen. We don't put it into blue or gray hydrogen. That's clear. And we do this because we believe that we have in Europe the endogenous sources, renewable sources, to actually feed the process and deliver cheaper green hydrogen than gray hydrogen in the 10 years to come. So that's the goal, putting the price bar in terms of green hydrogen at €2 per kilogram. Actually, if listening to Mark, well, it's important to signal also that the new administration in the US actually is even more ambitious. They say that they have this, they started with this Earth shot, now called hydrogen shot, to try to stimulate the market to deliver clean hydrogen by 2030 at $1 per kilogram. I find this too ambitious because this would really destroy completely the market for grey hydrogen, that's clear. But for us, we are a little bit less ambitious, but I guess more realistic. So for us, it's about meeting European Green Deal ambitious targets in a fast pace to address all the challenges you mentioned. Okay, and we want to do it in a virtuous cycle of positive feedback loops. On one hand, more variable or rather intermittent renewables, which is an absolute must to reach the EU targets, decreases the electricity price. So, but it also decreases and reduces the volatility in the price, in the electricity price, also in the market. So this benefits from a downward cost curve that we have seen for the last 15 years. Wind and solar dropping significantly, and this will all be factored in green hydrogen being produced at very low cost. So on the one hand, we have the OPEX addressed, the operational expenditure of producing hydrogen addressed because of this virtuous feedback loop that actually enables green hydrogen to benefit, to piggyback on the cost drop that we have seen in wind and solar. On the other hand, in the applications, it's more or less the same because we piggyback on batteries that have pushed the electric vehicles forward. And basically, a fuel cell electric vehicle is an electric vehicle. And it still has a battery, a smaller one, but it has a fuel cell and a hydrogen tank where you draw the energy, and with the fuel cell you produce the electricity to feed both the battery and the vehicle propulsion. So basically, we piggyback on all these innovations, this cost drop that we see already in other markets. But on the other hand, what I would like to say is that this increasing renewables to meet the targets of the European Green Deal increases the demand for electrolyzers as well, because these renewables are intermittent. They require a mean to store the electrons. Okay. So what's the use of having green electrons not being used, right? There's no use to that. So basically, if you store them, then in a battery could do the trick, but most probably in hydrogen, because then you can conserve the energy for a long period, for as long as you want, actually. Then you create the need for electrolyzers, which pushes the demand for electrolyzers, which enables gigafactories of electrolyzers, which in turn delivers economies of scale on the capital expenditure. So electrolyzers will go cheaper, and this means addressing both the sides of the cost curve for producing green hydrogen and feeding green hydrogen to the end-use applications. So that said, I mean, lastly, and just to finish the European picture, we have seen in July 2021 that the Commission came with the Fit for 55 legislative package. It's huge. It's the EU pushing for all hard-to-abate sectors to do its bit. And hydrogen is definitely there to do its wonders, and in a fully competitive market further down the road. So basically, we have the firepower now, we have the policy on our side as well. We will deliver, and we will make the case for a competitive Europe running absolutely on green energy sources. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Pedro. Mark and Pedro have appointed some good points about here. As I'd like to hear your opinion about the production sector, probably the question will be almost the same to Diogo. What are the biggest challenges that Caetano Buzz and the other manufacturers, face the most at the moment at the production. It's probably not storage, but the cost of raw materials, the cost of the production. What is the main that the Caetanobus, if you can unveil to us, what is?
Unfortunately, post-COVID, of course, we are still
Post-COVID,
COVID.
yes.
Post-COVID, we are facing a huge increase of cost on the raw material, but it's not linked to the hydrogen. It's a matter of fact. So we are trying to optimize costs and becoming more competitive, and also bringing the hydrogen solution to a more affordable cost and price. And the moment is not helping. Looking at exactly of the hydrogen segments or the hydrogen buses that we are producing, let's say the biggest changes are the new technology that we are introducing within our organization, within the doors of our customers. So there is a kind of knowledge that we were obliged to get it in a very fast track way. We need now to transfer this knowledge to the customers, for them to be, let's say, familiar with the new solutions, with the new way of maintenance of the vehicles, and so on. And at the same time, so we will say that resources with the knowledge and know-how on the hydrogen is very limited. We are training our engineers, we are training our, let's say, sales force and as well on the after-sales teams to be able to be aware of the latest details of this technology. And so it's a mix of constraints around this new technology, but I would say it's similar to others. When the battery electric vehicles appears, there was a need to adjust the way of making the business, even though for us today we are not just selling a vehicle, we need to go to the customer together, for example, with Galp, and say, we are here, we can offer an integrated solution where you just be able, at the end, for example, for a bus operator, to pay euro per kilometer, because the core business of the operators is to transport people, and they are used to be paid by kilometer that they transport people. So at the end, if we come to the customers with the kind of trying to just sell a vehicle as we were doing in the past for a diesel bus, for example, it doesn't work. So there is, let's say, the biggest challenges today or difficulties is at all levels to change mindset and make this, let's say, this step within the hydrogen environment. So it's a mix between all these factors that I just mentioned and the wish of the society to make this transition.
And to accept well. Diogo, probably the answer from the production and distributor side will be similar. You think that, as Nuno told about the technology cost, the know-how cost, and also the distribution and the storage are the main disadvantages that are probably not helping Galp at this moment to increase as they like it?
Well, first of all, we need to be fair with hydrogen. Hydrogen won't solve all the emissions problems. We should understand the merit order for decarbonization of the energy system. First of all, we have electrification, okay? Yes. And whenever we can use direct electrification to solve a problem, it will be most likely the cheapest way to do it. Okay, so this is important because sometimes we try to compete hydrogen with the electricity and they complement themselves, okay? And this has to be understood, otherwise we'll always think that hydrogen is too expensive. So this is important. First level, electricity, direct electricity, then roughly a third of all the emissions can be solved by electricity. And that's where hydrogen comes in. Okay. And thirdly, whenever hydrogen can't solve the problem, we'll have synthetic fuels, which I mentioned in the first question. So this is how we solve completely the emissions problem. Each stage has a different cost, okay? For the first level of electrification, in many end users today already it's cheaper to use electricity than the conventional solutions. We need to develop our own technology, and hydrogen is still not in the level of maturity that we find today batteries and many of the and renewables that support this. So then we need to understand that we have a target, okay? The European Union has a target for carbon neutrality by 2050. It has milestones in between, starting now, but very, very aggressive milestones for 2030. And so we have an European policy that is supporting these milestones. And I'd say that if there's a topic in which we have pretty consensus in Europe, is in the energy transition. Okay, yes. So we have these policies, and we have mechanisms both to fund, but also to promote the transition. I'd say CO2 price is the most important and broader of them all, but we have different mechanisms, and the recently presented Fit for 55 package, regulatory package by the European Commission. It was presented in July. Yes. It will hopefully come into force in the coming years, starting probably 2025 onwards. We'll put forward several policies to support the transition to low carbon solutions. Okay, so we're in the middle of an energy crisis right now. Energy prices are at record levels in some markets, and so we need to understand that first of all, it's very unlikely to have an energy transition with low fossil fuels prices. That's a law of economics, so it will be hard to do that. We'll most likely have this tension in the market that will help promote, and we'll have several mechanisms to promote this transition. So we see there's a huge push for hydrogen right now. We need to understand that most equipment suppliers are or were startups 5 years ago. So there's a huge effort on their side to increase their production to supply the market. So we'll probably have some trouble in putting equipment into the market that will, although we believe that costs will come down due to the growing industry and to scale effects. We'll also have some inflation due to the pressure on demand, and this is something we'll be going through this decade. Okay? We believe that costs will come down gradually, and that we'll be able to reach very competitive green hydrogen prices by the end of the decade. It's a learning process. It's not only in Europe. We see the US doing the same thing. Japan has been betting on hydrogen for a long time, and so we strongly believe this will happen at a cost. And for us, as an energy company producing and supplying hydrogen, the most important thing is to have off-taking to lower the risk on our projects. Okay, so I touched several points here. Yes. Ended up on our strategy, but this is how we see this happening, and let's
surely the final outcome will be the best, of course. The final outcome will be the best. So since we still have 10 minutes, I'm going to ask the audience if they have any question to collocate, to question our speakers. If not, I will just move to a quick question to all of you. That will be, I would like to have a quick answer, but I guess I will know the answer of Nuno, but I will try it. Despite Diogo is saying that electric and hydrogen complement each other, comparing the electric vehicles to the fuel cell electric vehicles, we are aware that the later one are saying lighter because it doesn't need to hold a battery like an electric vehicle. However, the disadvantage, as I told at the beginning, are many to these points. For example, when we are going for 100 kilometers in an electric vehicle, we can pay around 1.7 euros, 2 euros, between 3 euros. But when this subject is about the hydrogen fuel cell hydrogen vehicle, this cost can be around 13 and 15 euros. So we are talking about the operating costs that I guess you all talk in a good point in the second question. So this question will be for all of you, and I will start with you, Mark, since I took a note from your article I told at the beginning. So how do you consider this cost can be fought, can be countered by becoming a positive competition between the passenger cars fueled by hydrogen and the passenger cars fueled by electric vehicle? Probably the question for Nuno will be about the competition in the bus sector, but I will start it with you, Mark.
Thank you. The cost of the cost curve of hydrogen has been discussed quite a bit here. And by the way, we are here in California at about $15. I checked last night again, $15 per kilo. And as Pedro mentioned, there's an ambitious target, but there's not much behind it, the target of dollar per kilo, unfortunately. And we'd have to get to about $2.5 per kilo to be cost neutral between battery EV and fuel cell EV. But I want to add one thing briefly. It's also the incremental cost of adding range to a vehicle. I did calculation and come to so roughly, for an extra 100 kilometer of range on a passenger vehicle, to probably around $600 per cost on the vehicle versus for a fuel cell EV versus about $2,500 for the same addition of 100 kilometers of range for a battery EV. And that's on one side, it's adding batteries. On the other side, it's making the tank bigger. So you can see that the tank is just a shell, basically, which has much lower marginal cost than adding the fuel cells, which are just multiplying the double number of cells if you want double the range, which is not the same for fuel cell EV. So that makes sense in terms of long-range vehicles. By the way, the extra cost in terms of weight is also a lot better for fuel cell EVs than it is for battery EVs. Roughly 10 kilo for extra 100 kilometers of range for a fuel cell versus roughly 45 kilos at current conditions. So there's definitely a benefit in terms of cost, whether it's dollars or weight, which the weight also results obviously in consumption. But that puts the fuel cell at an advantage versus other vehicles for long range and one other special application with a lot of volume to put the tanks.
Thank you, Mark. Pedro, your opinion. You share the same opinion about this positive competition? How can be fought?
Yeah, absolutely. They are complementary, but I would add a different perspective. For me, it's much more, and independently of how appealing it is to compare batteries and fuel cells, it's much more about competing against the incumbent technology, which is diesel combustion engines. And with this in mind, we all want to replace this to achieve zero emission, right? And hydrogen is a much better place to do this in terms of, because of its operation similarities with diesel, meaning in terms of refueling time and also in terms of range compared to batteries, because indeed one fuel cell vehicle can replace one diesel vehicle, and it's not the same for batteries. So you would probably have to have a 1.3 factor to ensure that you do the same service. But what I wanted to say is that parity with diesel, in terms of the metric that we use, which is total cost of ownership, is roughly 7 euros per kilogram. and at the refueling station, okay? And this is achievable today. Today, if you have a smart coupling of infrastructure with the deployment of captive fleets, you already achieve this, okay? So that's clear. We are on the money compared with diesel, not with batteries, compared with diesel. If looking at long range, that's clear that there is a role for hydrogen. That's pretty obvious. Also for intensive usages. But when we compare batteries and fuel cells, the issue is that quite often we forget the hidden costs. So a decision today comes with costs for the future that could be locking in the technology and making us go in a way that becomes much more costly further down the road. And this is really critical because at scale, you will not be able to have battery all over because you don't have the power grid to do so. And if you start factoring in, if you discount these costs of upgrading the grid and factor it in the cost of electricity, then we will be making a fair comparison between hydrogen and fuel cells, because hydrogen factors it all in today. Okay, so that's basically the big question behind that nobody speaks about because it's not today. It's somewhere in the near future, but not today. Okay, so in the end, if you ask me, to be very blunt, for me, battery electric vehicles do the trick. If the usage is correct, you go for batteries. That's obvious. I would go for batteries if I live in a city and if I only go around the city. So depending on the usage. If you can do it with batteries, please do, because it will be much more efficient. If batteries don't do the trick for you, then the best solution for zero emission, that's clearly hydrogen. It's not. There's nothing else to beat it.
Thank you, Pedro. In the last 5 minutes, we'll bring again to the stage, starting with you, Diogo. What's your opinion about this positive competition and the operating costs that can be fought?
Okay. Picking on what I said formally, whenever you can use electricity, do it, okay?
Yes. Okay.
But, and using the numbers that you just mentioned, you referred to 3 euros per 100 kilometers yes. On a battery electric vehicle and
12 to 14
on hydrogen. We clearly believe that number can go down, okay? So probably to something like 7, 8, okay? By then it will be clearly competitive against diesel. But even in certain circumstances, imagine you're a taxi fleet owner and your taxis work 24 hours a day, okay? If you need to charge your electric vehicle and lose, let's say it's a fast charging, and you lose 2 hours of operation, okay?
Right.
If you were able, in those 2 hours, to do the difference, it pays off, okay?
Yes.
So if you're able to do 100 kilometers, well, clearly, you'll do more than the difference between 3 and 8. 5 euros in 100, well, you clearly do much more than that when you manage a taxi. So when you have this high intensity operations, you will, in several occasions, find that hydrogen, even in a light-duty vehicle, may be the best option. When you talk about heavy-duty vehicles, it's exactly the same.
The same. Mm-hmm.
I believe you will likely have trucks, electric trucks, and they will allow you to do 200, 300, 400 kilometers. But once you need to charge them, and you're moving things from Lisbon to Paris, the time it takes you to charge it, you lose the money that you won't lose using hydrogen. So in this situation, there are several use cases in which hydrogen will be more useful and more economic than electricity. And I'm not even talking about the time that I believe will come when we have autonomous vehicles, and autonomous vehicles will clearly work 24 hours a day, okay?
That will be the theme for next seminar, next year probably.
And by then, if it's 24 hours a day, you'll want to use all the time you have to make to use your vehicles, okay?
For sure, thank you. Last, what's your opinion about the operating costs? I had one last question, but we have 2 minutes. But I guess you already answered about it, about the thing that, in general opinion, the hydrogen vehicles are for heavy vehicles. Hydrogen are for heavy vehicles, not for passenger cars. But you already answered in your first question, if I'm not wrong. So what's your opinion about the operating costs, the third question that I mentioned? How can this be competitive?
It's clearly more expensive, the solution, CapEx, OpEx today. But as all the new technology, we have to see the things moving in a scale way. So the point is there is a need of scale. Without scale on the production, without scale on the demanding, on the demand, and also on the production of the vehicles, for example, we are not able to down the prices. And this is happening in all the technologies. All the others already mentioned, I'm just summarizing. So scale is necessary. We need scale. It's true that we have decarbonization targets for 2050, and I think that we, Caetano, Buzz, and I think many of the stakeholders involved on hydrogen, the world or even the Europe just realized that to reach 2050 for zero carbon in the operations, let's say, we must have other solutions, not only the battery solutions. As Diogo just mentioned, taxi fleet is one example. Another example that we know very well is the bus fleet. So if one operator like STCP or Carris, with a fleet of 300, 400 buses, if they need to overnight charge these 300, 400 buses, first of all, there is no grid from the energy supplier to allow this type of heavy consumption to charge buses. There is always also other question behind this energy. Is green energy that is charging these buses or not? So it's another subject that we can enter in other forums. And on the hydrogen side, it's when the flexibility of the bus, the diesel solution, appears back to the end users. So the taxi can go to the station and fulfill the tank with diesel in 2 minutes. With a Mirai, in 5 minutes or less, he is able to recharge, fulfill the tanks of hydrogen. In a bus, can take minimum three hours and a half to fully charge a bus for the day after. In a hydrogen bus, in 9 minutes or less than 9 minutes, depending on the protocol of the station, we can refill the bus. So it's not an issue when we. It's a big issue when we are looking at battery electric vehicles as the previous person has shown, when we just need 24 kilometers per day of usage. But if you are in a very demanding operation, a very operation where working 24 hours or even with a very short stops, there is no way to cope with that. And this is where hydrogen appears. This is why European Union realized that needs to subsidize this type of operations and support on the CapEx and OpEx. And then when there will be a scale, there is no need anymore for subsidies, and the prices will go down, and everyone will be living with hydrogen as we are living today with, for example, hybrid vehicles. That some time ago, no one were buying a hybrid vehicle because it was expensive, and also the gasoline were expensive. But today is proven that is a solution for the transition as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Since we are run out of time, I'd like to take these words from Nuno and thank you the audience for being present, and also special thanks for our magnificent panel, our 4 specialists. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Diogo. Thank you, Nuno, for being present and for sharing your powerful information and insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you have any questions after the session, I invite Diogo and Nuno to do a little bit networking.
Pleasure.
And if Pedro and Mark are available, I can share their emails for sharing some questions. Thank you so much again. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Good night.